I've been using this smart Rangeman for over a month now. Here is everything I learned so you can decide whether this watch is right for you. Before we start, I need to confess my biases. I am totally biased towards G-SHOCK. I love Casio and G-SHOCKs, so if I ever move to a smartwatch full time, I can give a little bit of leeway, as I did with the last Square I reviewed, versus a Garmin which I have owned and also an Apple Watch. And on my last review, I said that the Garmin was better in almost every way over the Square G-SHOCK that we looked at then. All except for the looks, of course. I'm still a fan of the G-SHOCK look, especially the Square. Garmin and Apple are just more of a mature product within this market. But you could argue that this watch has lineage back even before Garmin and Apple because some of its smart features and activities are powered by software that was created for the Polar watches. They were some of the very first fitness watches that were available on the market that had heart rate sensors. But what sets Apple and Garmin apart in this segment, I would say, is their integrations, not only with the apps that come with the watches, but also with other apps, like for example the smart scales that I use and my Peloton bike, whereas other smartwatches like the G-SHOCKs and another smartwatch I reviewed a few weeks ago, both of those don't have an easy integration with Peloton and a lot of those other services. And that's where I really downmarked the Square. Really felt like you were settling for a downgraded experience just to get a cool looking G-SHOCK. But I really think this Rangeman is in a different ballpark, really challenges some of those other watches. The Casio app seems to have had a big upgrade since the last review that we did. So that also means that the experience for that Square watch, that will also be improved as well. Although I think that this Rangeman really is a much better fitness watch than that Square one, and we'll go into that during the review. This watch is clearly geared towards the fitness market, but I would also say that it doesn't alienate the traditional Rangeman enthusiast because you still have the ABC sensors and that aggressive look that the original Rangeman had. I won't be reviewing this from the point of view of how good it is for exercise, running, etc. But if you're interested in that, I would definitely refer you to a channel called Chase the Summit. He did a great review from this fitness and running perspective. Check his upload out in the description, but make sure you watch the rest of this first. When I was testing this watch, I mainly used it for recording my steps during the day, and I also took it on a recent vacation where we did some really cool walks that I was able to track using the watch. Aesthetically, I love the look of the watch. It just has all of those cool G-SHOCK elements. The exaggerated design, the built-for-purpose look, the durable case construction. Every detail has a direct lineage back to those early Rangeman watches. This one is yellow, but if you're not feeling that, there's also a black version. Casio very kindly sent me this watch in for review, so I didn't get a choice on which colour arrived. Although the yellow has really grown on me. It did discolour during my time with it on the corners, as we can see here, but I can't say I was all that surprised with it being a bright yellow resin watch. While we're talking about the case, this watch also uses that bio-based resin, something that we've seen on the last couple of G-SHOCKs that we reviewed. Just to dispel a couple of myths about this bio-based resin, it's not made from recycled materials like some other reviewers have suggested, and it's also not biodegradable either. What Casio mean when they talk about bio-based resin is it's a plastic that's made from natural resources, crops that can regrow. Why they call it bio-based is because they are not using fossil fuels that traditionally plastic was made from. Overall, they're making less of an environmental impact. They're making it from a crop that can be regrown. To the best of my knowledge, you're not getting a degraded experience or less longevity in this resin than you would over the G-SHOCKs that you've owned for years. This new Rangeman is unapologetically big. It has a 60.6mm case by 53.2, 22.3mm thick, so it's definitely a big watch. But at only 92 grams, it's still very wearable due to how the straps articulate. Much better than, say, a Frogman that I tried on previously. There are also small bumpers on the inside that I can only assume are to stop the watch from pinching your skin at this articulation point. It's massive, but I found on my 7.2-inch wrist, it worked really well. G-SHOCK says is this watch is mud resistant, shock resistant, and water resistant to 200 meters. And there's no doubt in my mind, looking at the quality of construction and the functionality of the buttons, that all of that is completely true. I had the original Rangeman for a while, and it was one of my favorite G-Shocks that I've ever owned. I feel like this is an evolution of the design and not a departure from everything that made that first Rangeman so iconic. The watch features aggressive metal bumpers on the side and stainless steel mud resistant buttons. The buttons may be mud resistant, but it doesn't look like you would have to try too hard to get mud wedged into the gap between the sensor and the guard that protects the sensor. It looks like this bit can be removed with an Allen key for cleaning. I'm not sure if you're supposed to be able to do that, but just to point out, there definitely is a little gap there that I'm sure wouldn't be too difficult to get some debris stuck down. These buttons work well, although you really need to learn what they control when you first get the watch. It's a steep learning curve to work out all of the features. To get to the settings, you have to hold down the top button, which I don't think is that intuitive unless you had read the instructions previously. You have one central button that acts as the enter button and also accesses the active functions of this watch. I mainly used it for tracking my steps and walks. For that, you need to use the GPS. It does take a second to lock in that GPS, and a couple of times this caught me out because when you first press walking, it looks for the GPS, but it doesn't start the walk. So what you have to remember to do is keep looking at the watch until it does lock into that GPS signal and then press walk. And a couple of times I'd started walking, forgot that it was still looking for its GPS sensor, and then when I looked down, I then had to remember to press it to start the walk again. So I think that could be a little bit easier to do. Perhaps start the walk whilst it's looking for its GPS signal and then maybe catch up. The screen is very legible. It uses an MIP display. It's clear and easy to view in most lighting conditions, and if you struggle in low light, the backlight is also excellent. My only grumble is I wish you could switch to a positive display like you can on the Garmin. You have the ability to change to multiple different watch faces on here to suit what data you want to see or your personal preference, but one of the things you don't get the option to do is turn it into a positive display instead of a negative display. That was something I really liked about the Garmin and should really be a very easy software upgrade for G-SHOCK to do, because I think they'd only have to apply it to the app and then push it over. One of the cool uses of the watch faces is the one where you can customize the display. If you pick the last watch face in the list, you can display most of the information, and this is customizable to your needs. You can add moon phases, tide graphs, steps, and a bunch of other stuff. I was a little bit boring and just stuck to the dominant face that had the time on it. The battery on this watch is fantastic. I know that's not a measurement of capacity or running time, but I'm not sure how else I could say it. I've charged this watch once in 5 weeks, and I've worn it fairly regularly and used GPS quite a bit, and also the heart rate sensors and the other tracking features. The watch does feature solar, but unlike Garmin, there's no way of knowing, there's no graph or indication of how much charge or if it is charging from the sun. I wish they'd add that. That was another good feature that I liked in Garmin that I think they could easily add here, and it would give you an idea of how the exposure to solar is topping up your battery. But when you do need to charge it, there is a very easy clip system that seems to work a little bit better on this Rangeman than it did on that square one. Very impressed with the battery life on here, and I think that is also helped by the fact that the heart rate sensor on here can be set to only be active in an activity. So you have a choice for it to monitor you as a normal smartwatch would do all of the time, or you can toggle the setting and then have it only monitor your heart rate when you're doing an activity, which I imagine saves quite a lot of the battery life. As well as being a fitness watch, this watch is also aimed at the trekking and hiking market, and because of that, the main functions focus on this. It has 3 activity modes that are specifically based on trekking. You won't miss out if you're only using this for exercise, as it still has these features. I would also say if you're really into cycling, it does have a cycle mode, but as far as I can tell, there's no way to link other sensors to it, like a cadence sensor, for example. This is something, of course, that Garmin has a cadence sensor that links with the watch. I won't go into depth on all of the features, but to summarize here and also blatantly plagiarize from the G-SHOCK website, here are just some of the activities the watch has been optimized device to track. We have the tracking feature, which will record distance, time, pace, compass bearings, altitude, ascent and descent, heart rate and calories burned, running, walking and trail running, and again that will record distance, speed, time, pace, heart rate and calories burnt. The biking will record distance, your speed, the time that it's taken, also your heart rate sensor, calories burned, and road gradient. Open water swimming and pool swimming, that will record your distance, times and the calorie burned while doing those exercises. And then gym workouts and interval training. This watch also does have a countdown timer and a stopwatch, as you'd imagine, but it does have a specific interval training and gym workout mode. The measurement functions for these activities are enhanced with the 6 sensors that are built into the watch, as well as the GPS functionality to track movement in real time. The 6 sensors include an optical heart rate sensor, which uses LED light to measure changes in blood flow and track heart rate. There's an accelerometer built in that analyzes movements to measure activities. A gyroscope, which tracks swimming strokes and turns in the pool, also helps with the compass calibration. Magnetic sensor, pressure sensor, and thermosensor, which tracks the compass bearings, altitude, air pressure and temperatures, and accurately detects changes in outdoor environments. So you can get other things like your messages on here, you can get notifications from your phone. All of that I ended up switching off because that bit actually started to annoy me after a while, but you have all of those features as you would expect on this watch as well. If you want more details, check it out on the Casio website, and you can also even download the manual for this watch before you decide if you want to buy it or not. Last time we looked at that Square, I have to admit I wasn't crazy about the Casio app, but I'm impressed to see that they keep improving it. In order to sync the data from the watch, you will need to use the Casio app on your phone. However, the watch does work completely independently from the phone if you don't have it on you. You don't need the GPS from the phone to pick it up. It has its own GPS in there. You can also set all of the features on the watch itself by holding down the settings button. You don't need the app to make the watch work. It's just easier to set some of the settings like the time sync and how the menu options appear and how to customize some of the faces. It's easier to do it on the app, but you're certainly not tied to having to have the app and your phone with you if you want to use this watch. That is definitely a plus over some of the other smartwatches that are available on the market. It was lacking massively, the Casio app, compared to Garmin and Apple's offerings. My main criticisms were around the fact that the app didn't link with anything else. All of the data just seemed to be stored within the Casio app and wasn't easy to export out of the app. Well, this has got a lot better. You now have the ability to sync with the Apple Health Kit and also the Apple Fitness app, as well as the addition of now syncing this with Strava. And I think if you're properly using this watch for a lot of the trekking features, also the exercise, these are the two main things that you will probably really enhance your experience of this watch. One of the things I really liked about this watch syncing with Strava is not only do you get a much better map to look at, the map on the Casio device, as we can see here, I tracked a walk around some Mayan ruins. There is not a lot of detail on the map when you zoom in. You can see where I walked, but you can't see a lot of the surrounding area. Whereas when you sync this with Strava, not only do you get a map that shows you the GPS points that were plotted and where you went, but you can also download the GPS data from Strava. If you are a Google Earth desktop application user, you can import this file into Google Earth. You can't do it with the online version. You have to have the desktop version on your laptop. But here I pulled that file into Google Earth, and as you can see, not only do we get a much better view of the walk that we did around these Mayan ruins in Cozumel, Mexico, but we can also use the Google Street View to get a visualization, and you can really recreate some of the walks that you've done. So I think this is a great addition. This watch linked with the Strava app really enhances it. For me, I think this watch is a real winner. I am a big G-SHOCK fan anyway, so I'm glad that this now seems to be a proper contender. I felt like the G-SHOCK Square was a little bit lacking at that time. A big thanks to Casio for sending me this watch in for review, but now to the most important part. What do you think? let me know in the comment section down below. Do you already use a Garmin or an Apple Watch? Do you think you could replace it with this? Are you on the fence about smartwatches, and would this watch change your mind if you were already a G-SHOCK fan? Let me know in the comment section down below. If you enjoyed the video, hit that thumbs up. If you're new to the channel, I'd love it if you subscribe. If you want to get involved in the conversation live, join us on Sunday for the Sunday social live stream, and see you next time on Casual Watch Reviews.